This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Dan O'Brien begins today's show with a grain market update, where he covers the uncertainty of current wheat markets and the discrepancy between the latest USDA WASDE Report estimates and Argentinian estimates for corn and soybeans. Today, we continue our local wheat updates with crop production agent for the Midway Extension District, Craig Dinkel. He explains that the last precipitation received in his area was 6 months ago. We also hear from Ron Wilson with the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development. In this Kansas profile, Ron highlights the passion-driven horse nonprofit, Rainbow Meadows. This week's programming ends with an agricultural weather report from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip shares insight on the abnormally high temperatures we've been experiencing as of late and the slight chance for much-needed precipitation in the week or so ahead. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien for our grain market update. And Dan, before we get into things, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Samantha.
Absolutely. So let's start off as we usually do with our futures outlook. Anything crazy in the last week or so?
Really, when you look at the trend in wheat, it's been eroding. Our Western Kansas farmers find that hard to believe given the difficulties and the dry conditions that they have. But yet, poor exports, generally news from the Black Sea region with regard to plentiful wheat in export channels is coming back and boomeranging us. We see that trend in wheat. We can talk about that more in a bit. We talk about corn and soybeans. You've got some, in essence, general sideways to such weakness over the last few days. But you have Chicago May corn closing at 652. Probably what's noticeable to me is the drop off expected now from the current market price. Again, 652 in May down to Dees, which is 553, so almost fully $1. So the market clearly is expecting very good crops to come. And when they look out their front door out of the skyscraper in Chicago or out their window from their computer monitor, wherever they're at around there, yeah, there's moisture and pretty good conditions in the eastern and central corn belt, but we out here in the west don't see that. To me, that's a kind of a situation that set us up for futures to be just so-so, but then when we got into the heart of dry conditions out here in western corn belt last year, our basis really was strong. So if this kind of a narrative of generally a thought that the eastern and central corn belt will carry the day, and then the west, yeah, they've got some problems. If that plays out for this year, then to me, we'd probably be heading for pretty strong basis levels out here in western Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska again. So we'll see. And for soybeans trends, we have come down a little bit from highs that had occurred just recently up to about 1530 or so over the last 4 or 5 days. But again, May futures closed at about 1501, I guess, in the last day or so, and pretty strong still. Again, I don't know how much those exchanges have taken into account that some of the traders have taken into account news out of Argentina, out of the Rosario exchange, which gave a consensus forecast where they in essence lowered their projections of both their corn and their soybean crops because of this, what they're calling now is a 60-year drought. That really, quote, we'll use a scientific term, that really hammered their production this year. And that would be 3, 4, 5 million metric tons less than the USDA was even counting on in this WASDE report that came out on the 11th. So just a really challenging situation and probably sets us up for more tightening of world stocks down the road. And eventually, as you keep tightening up all those supplies and sending out the door quickly from buyers around the globe, what you have in hand, eventually we come back and the U.S. gets export business out of all that. I think our dollar from the Federal Reserve having raised the interest rates to combat inflation. The U.S. dollar's been pretty strong, but eventually, if there just isn't any place else to buy from, then even the U.S. with its high dollar gets some export business. So I guess we'll see. We're kind of balancing the calendar of when crops come in South America versus when we have it available, but overall, you've got a situation where the tightening of what you've got down in Argentina eventually comes into play. It's kind of a horse race between the increases that they're anticipating that may happen out of Brazil versus the determined and really in the bank losses that have occurred out of Argentina.
Sure. You mentioned those differences in estimates there between the U.S.'s WASDE report and then Argentina's numbers. Obviously, they know better than we do what they have. What are we missing here in the U.S., do you think?
I think that our U.S. currency is by far stronger than those other currencies. So, in essence, as buyers come to our shores and they come to a major export house and our export company and want to buy corn or soybeans or wheat, they'll ask what their price is and they'll say, fine. So they'll say that price of $15 or $16 for soybeans, that's okay. But then they have to go and buy high-priced U.S. currencies to exchange theirs with ours. So I think that's an underlying kind of insidious weakness that we have right now. If we had very strong exports, and we do have some export movement happening in the corn market and soybean market, but it's not enough to really excite the market and really hold things high. I think that the market that surprises me right now would be probably the corn market. The USDA did come out with just under 92 million acres projected to be the amount that we plant this year. We have a lot of moisture in the northern plains. Again, that will delay planting. There's a prospect of corn not being able to be planted in a timely manner, just like we had last year. And those acres being pushed out the back end of crop insurance support windows to a crop like soybeans that could come in later. And those same factors are affecting the hard red spring wheat crop as well. So from a supply-demand point of view, it looks like we have factors working against in a major part of the country. In the northern plains, too much moisture, too much drought down in the southern plains in the western corn belt. Anyway, so we've got factors working against the assumed strong supply numbers that the market apparently is anticipating right now for corn. And we haven't started planting very much yet. So I think where we stand now in mid-April, if we haven't changed appreciably and seen real planting progress and some moisture in these areas, then I would think that we'd be very likely to see a change in the perspective of the market, more bullish for corn than we're seeing right now. Again, what stands out is with some of these problems that we have around the country, we're still seeing corn at just about $5.50, $5.55. Through this winter, we spent a lot of time at $6 corn for these 2023. I guess we'll just have to play out and see what the planters actually get done in the field before we can really come to a solution. So what are we missing? We're missing fear of not getting the crop in.
Sure.
That right now isn't there in farmers' minds. But I guess I'd keep in mind that the year when we had such excessive moisture in the northern plains and parts of the northern plains around many parts of the Corn Belt, we really didn't see markets move off the rain makes grain mode until about mid-May. So, got a time yet here to have to wrestle with and see where we're at in the next month or so, and then reassess. And if we haven't made tangible planting progress, or if drought's hanging on, then you have a different story for new crop grain and old crop grain heading off into latter part of May, June, and July.
Sure. And, you just said the drought word there. That's going to tee us up for our next conversation that I wanted to have today, and that's on our wheat markets. It's been quite, I say this word tumultuous a lot when it comes to our wheat markets, and it's true. We're seeing that still play out now. Well,
we've got such bad ratings in these key states for hard red winter wheat that it's just startling. So you look at wheat conditions in Kansas. This is for the week ending April the 9th, and we haven't had much rain since that time. 33% very poor, 28% poor, 26% fair, and then good to excellent, only about 13%. That's Kansas. You look at Oklahoma, 25% very poor, 21% poor, 34% fair, only 20% good to excellent. Texas, only 17% good to excellent. So you've got really pretty poor conditions. The drought maps aren't really providing us much encouragement in those modes. You can go further and dig into the amount of the topsoil moisture conditions and the subsoil moisture conditions, and they're all pretty dire in these hard red winter wheat areas. So again, come back to your earlier question, what are we missing? Well, I don't know that we are trusting yet the hard red winter wheat crop in the U.S. will actually come out as badly as current conditions are. We've had a history of the resilience of that crop. It's fooled people, come out better, et cetera. And on Thursday, the market dropped appreciably, dropped about 16, 17 cents on the hint that there might be moisture coming. And some moisture. My contention would be it's not just a little bit of moisture that would give us the topsoil recovered some. It's enough moisture to go and replenish a foot and a half, and that would take substantial rainfall. So perhaps, Samantha, when you're out here in it like we are, perhaps I'm blinded by the challenge of what I see around me in terms of how tough things are. But we just have very, very tough conditions. Nebraska does as well, Colorado, et cetera. And, if we knock off 200 million bushels out of this, and really, how can we say that's not a possibility right now out of a normally 500 to 600 million bushel hard red winter wheat crop? You knock off a quarter of that or a third of it, then you're affecting the U.S. wheat balance sheet, which came out of that last WASDE report on the 11th, already tied with multi-year lows. So just a pretty challenging situation. So in all that, we just don't want to try to cheerlead the markets higher, but I do think that we've got a production challenge that's very likely to negatively affect supply-demand balances, and I'm just really curious where prices will go when we're all that much tighter for supply-demand in wheat in this market year in the U.S.
Sure. Well, you're not the only one expressing pessimistic sentiments when it comes to this year's wheat crop. We've spoken with several local agents throughout the week here, and they're expressing kind of the same for their areas. So here's hoping that precipitation that we're talking about that comes, in the next week or so is actually impactful. We'll hear more from Chip Redmond later in the show about that. So stay tuned if you're interested in learning more. But Dan, thanks so much as always for joining us today. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Samantha. Appreciate your good work.
Appreciate yours as well. Once again, everyone, that was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien starting today's show with our grain market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. Today, we're continuing our wheat update of current county conditions across the state. We recently spoke with Sandra Wick from the Post Rock District, as well as Todd Schmidt from Greeley County. And now we're joined by Craig Dinkel. He is the crop production agent for the Midway District. So, Craig, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We were speaking beforehand and, we were chatting about current conditions in your area. And there's not a lot of optimism just because it's been so dry.
Yeah, that's like we were talking before, is kind of our biggest issue and factor facing our wheat crop right now is just our dry conditions that, we've been facing, started 9 months ago, essentially, last summer. So we've just kind of stayed dry then all the way through the winter.
Sure. And we were talking about fall planting in your area, and you guys got some precipitation, timely precipitation then, and that was about 6 months ago, but that's the last precipitation you've really had, right?
Yeah, like I said, we were lucky in this area. Guys, at least got the wheat planted and had a decent to maybe just slightly below average on our stands, but for the most part, the wheat did get established and growing before the winter, and we were just kind of hoping we could catch some either winter precip or some precipitation, starting here in February and March, but that just hasn't happened. For reference, looking at the Kansas Mesonet at the Lorain station, last time we had half an inch of rain was about 6 months ago, and the last time we had 3/4 or an inch of rain is 281 days, which is about 9 months ago. So, we just don't have a lot of moisture in the soil for the wheat to, get rooted down and tap into that profile.
Sure. So unfortunately, that means that you all missed out on some of those timely snows that I know folks to kind of the northwest of you took advantage of, right?
Yep. This area just kind of got missed on any winter precip this last year.
But you guys definitely experienced winter weather conditions, I would say, in terms of the temperatures that you all saw. Was there any winter kill that you've seen out in the field so far?
No, this area, surprisingly, we had several of those, really cold snaps, December and that came through with some really, really cold temperatures. There's some out there that I've came across just in certain scenarios, but nothing widespread. I've seen, just some spots, terrace tops, and that, fields that kind of were either double cropped in after soybeans last year, or continuous cross, but nothing widespread where you'd see whole fields.
Sure. Well, that's good news that we'll take in this realm of speaking. And, we're talking about conditions that we've seen up to this point, but currently, where does the crop really stand in your area, would you say?
Well, like I said, with the lack of moisture, we were just kind of holding on through the winter, and, once weather kind of has warmed up, unfortunately, with the lack of rain and moisture, it's just kind of been stalled out. But warmer temps, it's going to try to, it's been trying to get up and growing, but just no moisture there to, get to grow. We're kind of hitting that joining stage now in this area, but we're just kind of stalled out on growth. It's just, a lot of moisture stress has been showing in the wheat in this area, especially with the warm, windy conditions we've had the last few weeks.
Absolutely. Well, here's hoping, Craig, for some timely precipitation to head y'all's way. I know many are hoping for the same.
Yep, it's hard to say how long this wheat will hold on without getting moisture. So hopefully we can just hold on, and hopefully farmers will be able to raise some wheat to harvest.
Absolutely. Yeah, a valuable crop for sure, and a valuable update you've provided us with today. So, Craig, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was Craig Dinkel. He is the crop production agent for the Midway District, joining us to share some information on their current wheat conditions in his area. We'll be continuing today's show now with a Kansas profile from Ron Wilson with the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development here at K-State. Today, Ron highlights the nonprofit Rainbow Meadows, which was created by Karen Everhart. Inspired by her love of horses since she was a kid, as an adult, her nonprofit organization now rescues, rehabilitates, and rehomes horses, while also offering a place where horse owners can send their older equines to live out their days in comfort and safety. We'll hear from Ron now.
This is Kansas Profile. I'm Ron Wilson, director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University. The 3 R's. When I was a kid in school, that referred to reading, writing, and arithmetic. Today we'll learn about a different set of R's that are being applied to the world of horses: rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome. Those are the goals of a remarkable enterprise which is helping to save and benefit horses in rural Kansas. It's today's Kansas Profile. Karen Everhart is executive director of the nonprofit organization Rainbow Meadows Equine Rescue and Retirement, which she co-founded with her husband Dave. Karen and Dave are from the Wichita area originally. Karen said she was the proverbial horse-crazy girl who spent summers with horses on her family's farm in southeast Kansas. She met and married Dave, who would spend 38 years in military service. Karen became a medical administrator but never forgot her love of horses. In 1981, she purchased the first horse of her own, a golden Palomino mare named Rainbow. Over time, she added to her horse herd. In 2005, she retired from her health administrator position and purchased a ranch in Chautauqua County. People would contact me about some horse that was abandoned or in a kill pen and say, "Could you help this horse?" Karen said. Within 4 months, her horse herd doubled from 10 to 20. It was clear there was a need. In September 2005, Rainbow Meadows Equine Rescue and Retirement was incorporated as a 501c3 organization. It can now receive tax-deductible donations. The organization is named Rainbow Meadows in honor of Karen's first beloved horse. Since that time, we've worked harder than we ever did in our professional lives, Karen said with a smile. We appreciate our wonderful, caring volunteers, she said. The goal is to rescue horses, mules, and donkeys which are at risk. These equine are rehabilitated and, where appropriate, adopted out to caring homes. There are 2 types of intake to the program. One is horses from horse owners who find themselves unable to care for their equines due to circumstances such as illness, changed family situations, or otherwise. We can be a first responder for the horses, Karen said. The second type of intake, much less common, is receiving horses through a sheriff's or police department when the horses are legally seized due to abuse or neglect of the animals. Karen and Dave's daughter earned her master's degree at K-State, met her future husband, and eventually settled in the Manhattan area. When grandchildren were born, Karen and Dave wanted to be closer to them. I told the board of directors that we wanted to move closer to Manhattan, so maybe it was time to close Rainbow Meadows, Karen said. The board said, "You're welcome to relocate, but we want this to continue," she said. After a long search for property, Karen found and bought the place where Rainbow Meadows is today. God opened the door to this place, Karen said. It's located along Highway 77, 8 miles south of Junction City, and north of the rural community of Woodbine, population 157 people. Now that's rural. This is a mission. This is a ministry, Karen said. These abused horses don't deserve the kind of treatment they've received. Since its founding, Rainbow Meadows has assisted in rescuing hundreds of horses. In addition to having horses which are adopted out, Rainbow Meadows offers a horse retirement program where owners can provide monthly support for their horses to come to Rainbow Meadows and live out their days in safety and comfort. In support of this work, a fundraising gala is held each year. In 2023, the gala will be held at Rock Springs Ranch on the evening of April 1. For more information about the gala or about Rainbow Meadows, go to www.rainbowmeadowsranch.com. The 3 R's. In this case, the 3 R's refer to rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome, which are the goals of Rainbow Meadows Equine Rescue and Retirement. We commend Karen and Dave Everhart and all those involved with this remarkable organization, which is making a difference in the lives of horses and horse owners. They are doing rescue really right. For the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development, this is Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile.
Once again, that was Ron Wilson with the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development here at K-State, bringing us a Kansas profile on the nonprofit organization Rainbow Meadows. We're cutting to a short break now, but when we return, we'll be back with this week's agricultural weather report from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip covers the past week of weather that we've seen, including abnormally high temperatures for this time of year, and also talks about the week or so ahead with some hope for some much-needed precipitation. If you're listening to us on the radio and are afraid you're going to miss out on our next segment because you're reaching your destination or have something else that you're having to switch to quickly here, don't forget the Agriculture Today programming is also available as a podcast. Our podcast is easily accessible on all podcasting platforms, including our website, agtoday.net, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can simply search us on any podcasting platform, Agriculture Today, Kansas State, and we are more than likely to pop up, and you can follow us there. That way you can simply have us pop up in your regular feed on whatever platform you're using and listen to us more regularly that way. Once again, you can easily access that on agtoday.net or any podcasting platform by simply searching Agriculture Today, Kansas State. We'll be back with that agricultural weather report when we return on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We're ending today's programming with our agricultural weather report for the week, and joining us for that today is K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. So this past week, lots of fire weather from what I understand.
Yeah, we've been really warm, and we're running about 15 to almost 20 degrees on a couple of days above normal temperatures for both the highs and the lows. And when we combine that with April, our windiest month of the year, and we've seen sustained winds out of the south every day pretty much this week, except for Monday, with up to 20, 25, even 30 miles an hour. And when you put those two together with the fact that we still have drought across the landscape, much of Kansas has gone a month or more without wetting moisture. We get down into the southwest Kansas, we're talking like hundreds of days without wetting moisture. And so we end up with fire weather concerns with the dormant fuels that are still there. Our green up paused in March, starting to slowly progress now, but there's just not enough soil moisture for it to progress. And as a result, we're just seeing more fire. And even green grass that has greened up is burning. That's
led to quite a few fires that you've been a part of fighting this past week, right?
Yeah, the northern Flint Hills and parts of north central Kansas have had quite a few fires. Not significant fires that take many, many days to put out, but every day departments are out running fire for 4, 6, 8 hours, and it's starting to take a toll just talking to people and personal experiences. We're ready for some rain.
Sure, and I guess Ottawa got some of that rain that we've been hoping for, 4 inches.
Yeah, Monday we had a really interesting rain event that was very similar to like a June rain event where we just isolated storms percolating slowly southward in eastern Kansas. Kansas City to Ottawa and southward all saw some moisture, but it was very sporadic, and the heavier storms dropped multiple inches of rain in a very short period of time. They were even issuing flood warnings at one point. So it could change quickly, and that's a great reminder that Kansas climate is extremes. We average those extremes, that's our climate. And we need to expect the unexpected and expect it to flip a switch pretty fast when it does.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, we're expecting some severe weather today, actually.
Yeah, so chance of thunderstorms develop in central Kansas today with some severe weather risk with hail and maybe even an isolated tornado and very localized rainfall and downpours as they move off to the east and diminish overnight. Just a small chance of moisture, nothing widespread, but at least we're starting to introduce some chances of moisture again, and hopefully we can keep that and move it in the positive direction.
Yeah, just kind of a reminder of that switch to La Nina. Obviously, we've talked about it in the past. It's a transition to this different weather pattern.
Yeah, we're still in La Nina. Well, we're not technically in La Nina when you look at the Pacific Ocean, but we're still feeling the impacts of La Nina. We're in a very La Nina-like pattern right now that bucked the trend of non-La Nina-like pattern for the last few months, and unfortunately has brought continued dryness. And as we move forward, we still need to transition to that neutral period, which is not favorable for moisture in the spring in Kansas.
Sure, but there is some hope for some precipitation in the future?
Yeah, we're keeping spotty chances of showers, storms around for various parts of the state, depending on the day, through next week. But overall, we're going to be drier than normal, I think, for most of the state, unless you get really lucky and under localized downpours for multiple days in a row. And we're going to stay warm. We're going to have brief cool down this weekend, and then next week we just jump right back up to the 80s with gusty winds when they're not seeing cloud cover or random thunderstorms, and very summer-like feel to April.
I know we've talked about the switch from spring to winter back and forth. It seems like we're finally in that swing period. So can we expect temps? I know you mentioned a quick cool down, but are we going up from here?
Well, we already are up as warm as we've been the last week. And compared to normal, our average highs are only the mid to upper 60s, and average lows are around the 40-degree mark. So when we're hitting 85 degrees and not getting below 60 on some nights, very, very warm. Start to think about the last spring freeze and when it occurs. You know, the Manhattan area sees it all right around the 17th to the 22nd of April. So we're in the ballpark of that. And as you get further west and north, it's obviously later, and south and east, it's earlier. So we could still see a freeze, but looking at the long-term models, I don't see any suggestion of a really cold air mass in place. We'll hit the 30s briefly this weekend and Saturday and Sunday morning. But other than that, I just don't see any really long-term cold snap in the horizon.
Great. Well, good to know. Great information you shared with us today, as always. Chip, thanks so much for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond providing this week's agricultural weather report. We'll be back with more on Monday on Agriculture Today.